Hello everyone, back tuning into today's video. We're going to have a look at various things in today's video, a bit of a Sunday morning roundup. So we'll start off looking at the cold weather that we've got going on across Europe. We'll have a look at a few pictures that have been posted at Gazweather's comment box from Romania. We will go on then and have a look at a couple of years that had similar conditions in January, but I think we might be close to this year. We'll have a look at the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation, see what's going on in the stratosphere in terms of the stratospheric temperatures over the Arctic, and we'll have a look at weather next week, 10 days. So a lot to cram in, and I better go and get on with it quite quickly. Before I get on with that though, just say about the ads. There's links to articles on the pages. Have a browse through widgets and click through links. If there's any articles that you're interested in, you'll be helping us to pay website. Thanks very much for doing that. So these are the temperatures at 9:30 this morning, or these were the temperatures at 9:30 this morning. Again, showing most parts of Europe firmly locked into the freeze. You can see the British Isles and Ireland out here perched on the edges of Europe and sitting next to the warm Atlantic Ocean, so very mild generally there, but most places further east coming out freezing, even down in central Spain, which isn't bad unusual actually. You do think of Spain as being quite a warm place, but in the winter, central and northern Spain do get actually very cold, and central Spain was down to -4 to -10 overnight. Those frosty conditions spread through France, particularly the south of France, and then it's really east of that but we get the really cold air. So we come into central and eastern Europe, Poland going down to -10 to -19 degrees, for example, and east of that we're going down to -20 to -30 by the time you get through into western parts of Russia, ferociously cold there, and then down into which is southeast Europe, so through the Balkans in towards Romania, temperatures widely -10 to -16 or 17, and then that continues down into Greece and Turkey as well. I believe Istanbul airport has been closed this morning, so the big freeze continues really for many central eastern parts of Europe. It is milder, remains milder in the west. Alex posted these pictures to Gazweather yesterday. This is Constanta in Romania on the Black Sea coast, and well, there's the sea and the freeze going on all around it, and some more pictures there. Dramatic ice sort of sculptures really being formed by the sea and the severe cold mixing together. There's a bench completely covered in snow, and there's Constanta town centre with huge snowdrifts going on, and I think that really sums up how much snow they've had in Constanta in Romania. Very deep snow cover there, and severe cold temperatures as we've already established. Remember, if you've got any pictures, if you're in Europe and you're watching and you would like to feature your pictures in the videos, you can post them to the comment box at Gazweather, or you can email them to us at gazweather@gmail.com. We're always happy to feature those pictures if you would like to do that. So these are the upper air temperatures. Actually, these are the dew points, so I'll just go back to the upper air temperatures that we've got across Europe at the moment. You can see that the severest of the upper air temperatures are beginning to move down into the southeast of Europe now. We always thought, but as we went through the weekend, we would start to see the upper air temperatures at least beginning to moderate through central Europe, and that's taking place with the severest of the cold now into the southeast of Europe, and also extending up into western parts of Russia. However, on the surface it's still very cold, so these are the dew points with better indication of surface temperatures, and you can see just how locked in that cold air is through the vast majority of Europe with sub-zero, with the temperatures particularly severely cold, of course, in the east and the southeast of Europe. Now, we did have a couple of years, about 10 years ago, that was similar to this in January. So this is 2005, which was a big near-miss freeze for the UK, but many parts of Europe turned cold. So this is 20th of January. We had this trough of low pressure moving in towards Scandinavia, and then that set up quite a pronounced cold spell actually through central parts of Europe around the 22nd of January 2005. This high pressure, which it's been a sort of a feature we've had this winter as well, high pressure very close to our west-southwest, that has a go on the 24th of January 2005 at reaching northwards. And for a while, the models, I remember it very well, models were predicting quite a big freeze for the UK in January 2005. It didn't come off. We did get a little cold snap. We went into the northeast just for a day or two. But the real freezing weather was over on the continent, as you can see, with those upper air temperatures. That was a big near-miss sort of freeze that we had in January 2005, with many parts of the continent cold, the UK and Ireland, and just about in Scandinavia on the mild side of this ridge of high pressure. It just didn't quite get up to Scandinavia, but you notice on the 27th of January how close we are to that big freeze, with most parts of Europe, particularly against southern, eastern, southeastern Europe, in those very cold easterly winds. And then we did it again the next year in 2006, but this was an even severer cold spell that we just missed out on in January 2006. So this is 20th of January 2006, where we see that, again, low pressure is dominating for us, but most parts of Europe are under cold air, particularly in eastern and northeast Europe, with this area of high pressure to the north of Scandinavia. So there's the extent of that severe cold pool that came out of Russia and pushed into Scandinavia and Eastern Europe up towards the last stages of January 2006. You see much severer cold weather 2006 compared to 2005 across much of Northern Europe. And what happened is that through that latter stage of January 2006, we kept those mild upper air temperatures going in West Europe. It did turn a bit colder for us down on the surface towards the end of January, but actually the upper air temperature was quite mild. And the severest of the cold air actually sunk down into eastern and southeast Europe, very similar to what's going on at the moment. So there we are on the 25th of January, when we had a near miss with that freezing, where we've remained under this fairly mild ridge, albeit it did get cold on the surface. But it's a fairly mild ridge with the really cold air across eastern parts of Europe. And that's very similar to what's happened this year. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is because where we are in the solar cycle right now is very similar to where we was in 2005 and 2006. So this is where we are right now in terms of solar cycle 24, the current solar cycle, which is winding down in towards solar minimum. And we are very rapidly moving down towards solar minimum. We'll get to solar minimum around 2018, 2019. And this is where we was around 2005, 2006, in that sort of area just there. So we are in a very similar type position, really, at the moment, in terms of the sunspot numbers that we're getting at the moment compared to what we're getting in 2006. And I think what happened in 2005 and then more so in 2006, in fact, it was like a precursor of where everything was going to go as we got to solar minimum. So as you get to solar minimum, the chances of northern blocking and cold weather increases for Europe, particularly. It's less of the case for America and Asia, but for Europe, because of the interaction of the sun on the jet stream coming across the Atlantic, when you're in solar minimum and you come out of solar minimum, you tend to increase the chance of northern blocking. Northern blocking is the route to cold weather. We know we had that run of really cold winters starting 2008-9, going through 2009-10, and into 2010-11, particularly the December to remember in 2010, which was the coldest December since 1890. I think the first signs of that really started in 2005 and 2006, particularly 2006, where we, again, had that very near miss big freeze, and the big freeze did engulf many eastern and northeastern, eventually southeastern parts of Europe. So what's going on right now could be our first indications, really, that over the next, let's say, next 5 years, we're going to start to trend into colder winters. Again, that's what I suspect will happen as we get to the solar minimum of solar cycle 24, and then begin to move towards solar cycle 25. I think we will trend into a period of colder winters. Not every winter will be cold through that period, but let's say from around 2018 through to 2023, something like that. I think we will have at least a couple of potentially quite cold winters, and I would suspect what's going on at the moment with this near-miss big freeze that we've had in the east and the southeast Europe is probably the beginnings of the atmosphere just telling us that we better watch out over the next few winters, because have the chance, or an increased chance, of colder weather. It will depend, each individual winter will be unique unto itself, though, of course. It would depend what's going on with things. So let's say we get a big El Nino next winter, then that winter is likely to be mild. And the same if we was to go to big La Nina in a couple of years' time. Again, that winter would likely be mild, just because these events ramp up the jet stream a little bit. So we'll still have to look at what's going on for each individual winter. Just because you're in solar minimum, you've got quiet sunspot numbers, low sunspot numbers, it doesn't guarantee that every winter will be cold, but it just increases the chances. Loads of dice, if you like, in favour of increased colder conditions as you go into and then come out of solar minimum. I've got to feel what's going on right now. It's the first sort of precursor to all of that. So it's going to be fascinating over the next few years to see how that plays out. Right, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, so let's get back on track. We're going to look at the Arctic oscillation and the North Atlantic oscillation next, see what's going on there. So this is the Arctic oscillation observed and forecast chart. So the black lines here is where the Arctic oscillation has been, the red lines at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic oscillation to go. We can see that through most of December, it was a mild December, and the Arctic oscillation was positive, so we didn't have much northern blocking. At the end, the red lines are trending down, notice. So this is telling us that as we go towards middle of January, this is 16th of January just here, we have got an increased chance of some blocking appearing over the North Pole. So I think what we're going to be seeing as we get towards middle part of January is that we're going to have colder conditions, a colder snap. But whether this really truly locks into anything prolonged in terms of cold weather, it's hard to say. I'm going to show you the GFS and the ECMWF models at the end. They are a bit split really about where things are going beyond next weekend. We're going to get our northerly snap at the end of this week, just into weekend, and then where things go after that, we're going to wait and see. But certainly the Arctic oscillation looks like it's trending more towards negativity as we get towards mid-January. Remember, the Arctic oscillation is not driving anything, it's just an index that reflects the state of the atmosphere. Same idea with the North Atlantic oscillation. The black lines where the North Atlantic oscillation has been, the red lines where the GFS ensembles are forecasting North Atlantic oscillation to go. Again, this is just an index that's telling you what the Atlantic is doing this time in the what the atmosphere is doing this time in the Atlantic as opposed to the North Pole. So again, through December, actually the North Atlantic oscillation was more towards negative through much of December, although it did go very positive around Christmas. But it was quite interesting what happened in December, because the North Atlantic oscillation wasn't all that positive. It's the Arctic oscillation that seemingly was driving things. Anyway, we go through into the forecast part, and it looks like we've got a bit of a spike actually with the North Atlantic oscillation over the next few days, and then again trending down, but only going down to neutral, not going down to a negative North Atlantic oscillation. So it looks like we're going to have again the Arctic and the North Atlantic oscillations out of sync a little bit over the next couple of weeks. Stratospheric temperatures over North Pole next. So this is where we currently stand at 30 HPA over North Pole. And what happens with this is that, what happened is that back in November, we had quite a warm stratospheric temperature actually over the North Pole at 30 HPA. And that was associated with the weaker polar vortex and had a colder month in November. December saw a crash, and this is where we currently are with those temperatures at 30 HPA over the North Pole. We're still very cold. This is one of the top levels of the atmosphere over the North Pole. When it's cold like this, it goes along with an increased polar vortex, so stronger westerlies essentially coming through the mid-latitudes. If we manage to keep things fairly warm over the stratosphere through this winter as we had it in November, if we hadn't had this big drop in temperature during December. I think we probably would have had a better chance of a colder winter, or certainly a colder first half of the winter. That's what the UK Met Office was expecting. They was expecting that we'd have a cold start to winter, certainly through December. But the crash that took place over the North Pole in terms of those stratospheric temperatures really ruined that possibility, because when temperatures collapse like that very quickly, usually the polar vortex will ramp up, and that's what happened really to deliver us a fairly mild temper, albeit it wasn't that Atlantic driven, it wasn't exceptionally wet. And 10 HPA, which is a little bit higher than 30 HPA in the atmosphere, you see that we have actually bottomed out the temperature there. So again, we did have the collapse at 10 HPA through December. But as going into January, actually, we've started to lift those temperatures. Not back to average. We're still trending, or we're still well under the trend of where we should be in terms of the temperature at 10 HPA over the North Pole at this time of the year. But we are lifting the temperature up. So it looks like we've reached our lowest point of the winter for those temperatures at 10 HPA. We begin to lift up. Remember, what we're looking for is a warming to take us back towards the trend. Or if we can get in, if you want cold weather, we want a sudden stratospheric warming, which sends the temperatures shooting up to there somewhere. And when that happens, a couple of weeks on, you tend to get an increased chance of blocking. This is how the GFS is forecasting things to go in terms of the stratospheric temperatures over North Pole over the next couple of weeks. This website, metroseal.fr, find a link to Metroseal on the links page. So this is our cold stratosphere over North Pole, these blue and purple colours. We're looking to infiltrate certainly yellows into the North Pole. If we can, we're looking to infiltrate orange and red colours, which would be a sudden stratospheric warming. Let's run through the middle part of January and see what model is doing. Well, it is creating quite a warming around Greenland, which is putting the polar vortex and those cold stratospheric temperatures under pressure to some degree. This is the 16th of January, where we've got quite a warm stratosphere around Greenland and going into Scandinavia. It is really moving around these cold temperatures and lifting them up a little bit. Not a sudden stratospheric warming, probably not even particularly a warming getting into the North Pole itself, but it certainly is putting those blue colours, the cold temperatures at 10 and 30 HPA, certainly putting those cold temperatures under pressure. We need to keep an eye on this, because I've noticed that when we get this kind of warming occurring around Greenland and trying to infiltrate into the North Pole, it can sometimes be the first signal that the sudden stratospheric warming is on the way. So we see no signs of a sudden stratospheric warming certainly up to the 24th of January, which is as far as we can go with the GFS one at the moment. But let's just keep an eye on this over the next week or two, because as we get to the end of January, we might have a chance of getting a bit of a sudden stratospheric warming going. Right, just dealing with the weather next week to 10 days finally. So we've got a cold snap coming up at the end of week and into weekend. These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles. Red line here is the 30-year temperature average. Going to be a bit milder than average over the next couple of days, going into Wednesday, then we turn colder Thursday, Friday into Saturday. The trend of the model then, or the ensembles, is to turn things milder into the period sort of next week, if you like. So after the weekend into the third week of January, it's lifting the temperatures up. But there are a few cold outliers there, indicating that some members of the GFS ensembles are keeping the cold weather going into the third week of January. But the trend after the cold snap is to turn things milder. And in terms of precipitation, well, this cold weather does have some precipitation with it, actually, this cold snap. So there is a risk of some wintry weather, especially so for the north, but wouldn't entirely rule out a little bit of snow even down in the south sometime around Friday or Saturday. This is the GFS midnight run for Thursday, when we start to bring that colder air in from the northwest. That northwesterly turns into a northerly on Friday. If you follow the isobars back, the air is originating from a long way north, going up to the North Pole, so real northerlies coming down there across the country on Friday. Those will be very cold. Then he wants to run this little area of low pressure in on Saturday. Now, that's coming into really cold air, so I think it's a bit uncertain. Their models are moving this low pressure around a lot, but if it did come off like that, it would be a snow event. I had a look at the snow charts, the precipitation forecast charts from the GFS model earlier on, the midnight run. And it is indicating a bit of a snow event on Saturday for England and Wales. I'm a bit dubious, though. I would suspect this low pressure will either be trended southwards or it just won't develop at all when we actually get closer to the weekend. But watch this space. Friday, Saturday does look a little bit interesting. Beyond that cold snap, the GFS wants to bring the westerlies back. So this takes us up towards day 10. This is Tuesday, 17th of January. And then on to Wednesday, the 18th, we're going back into a southwesterly quite clearly there. So after the cold snap, mild Atlantic-driven conditions return once more. The ECMWF is very different, though. So this is how things are looking for Thursday. Again, we've got the cold weather coming in from the northwest. Then it turns northerly with the wind on Friday into Saturday. We are into a cold Arctic plunge with northerly winds. So both models in agreement for that. Then things change. Whereas the GFS from sunny wants to begin to bring the Atlantic back, the ECMWF builds this ridge out to west of us, which keeps winds into the north, and then it starts to move the ridge up towards Scandinavia. So things start to get very interesting as we go beyond the middle part of the month. We go to Tuesday 17th of January, where the GFS is bringing the westerlies and the southwesterlies back. The ECMWF has high pressure over Scandinavia and the wind coming in from the east. And those easterlies continue into Wednesday, day 10, Wednesday 18th of January. Bitterly cold easterly winds are probably bringing snow or snow showers into eastern and southern parts of the country. A huge difference there between the ECM, which is easterly, and the GFS, which is southwesterly. ECM ensembles for DeBuilt show that this morning's operation run, so the run we're just looking at, which develops at easterly, was a little bit of a cold, I wouldn't say cold outlier, because it has got a fair amount of support. There it is, that red line just there is the operational run of the ECMWF. It's on the colder side of the cluster, but I wouldn't say it's a cold outlier because it has got several members doing something similar. And overall, the ECM ensembles for DeBuilt in Holland look rather split, but they do look, I think there's more on the colder side going up to day 10 than there is on the milder side. So certainly what the ECM is doing this morning, building that ridge of high pressure over Scandinavia and getting the wind into the east, it's not without support. So it's a possibility, but until we see the GFS and its ensembles starting to come into line with that, I think we've got to be very careful about how far we go. I would suspect the most likely outcome, just because of how this winter's gone, is that we'll reintroduce the Atlantic after the cold snap. But let's wait and see what happens. I might have a run through the GFS ensembles tonight, see if any of the ensemble members are backing up this idea of getting the wind into the east. I suspect there'll be one or two, but probably not all that many. But we'll have a look perhaps tonight. So that's it. Been quite a long video. I hope you have enjoyed my Sunday morning rambling. Food for thought there with the thing going to solar minimum, what's going to happen over the next few years. It'll be very interesting to see whether we do get some colder winters coming along as we move into solar minimum and then on into the start of solar cycle 25. This evening we'll perhaps have a look at the GFS ensemble, so keep an eye out for that. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.